Is that how you're starting it?
I'm gonna start it. Listen, I'm not good at being organic. I gotta think of
Like, yo, I'll get into acting mode.
acting mode, right? Begin. Put the hat on. Well, everyone, welcome to episode 3 of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Lord Rumi this time he's in the editing bay. So if you want to make yourself known, Rumi, you want to make any changes, give the fans any feedback or anything, we'll give you a moment right here. But today we are joined by Lord Herman, friend of the show, friend of us, and someone who shares our interest in our place in the world, our infrastructure, and our means of transportation, our community building. These are very important things to Herman, as well as I'm sure we've had so many conversations before this in our cars before. Happens all the time. Herman.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Really glad to be here. My name's Herman, everyone. Friend of the show, good friend of Gurpinder. Don't really agree with the Lord title so much.
The Lord? You'll grow into it.
But really glad to be here and be talking about something that, I'm really fond about, right? Public infrastructure and making sure that we've got the necessary things we need to be able to move around this city.
Exactly. That is so important. And we've been talking about this story a little bit between the two of us for a while, that you've recently been on a trip in East Asia, in China and in Japan. And one thing Rumi and I have done in the past in episode 1 is we talked about Toronto infrastructure, what that looks like.
Yeah.
Where we feel like we can notice there are aspects like the GO train and all these things. The GO train, the streetcars, and all these aspects exist, but it feels like the community feels very disparate. It feels like the trains aren't very well funded or upkept. They're privatized. And we're always wondering, because I live here, I can speak from my own experience, I live here. I haven't really traveled that much. I don't actually know what better transit looks like. So I was wondering for all our viewers out there who might also share the similar experience to me, could be that they might not know actually what good public transit looks like. To them, it might be, oh, you're using a train or you're using a bus. That's for poor people, bro. That's like, you don't got a car, you don't got a license. What are you doing, bro? That kind of stuff, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I'll start off by saying that, through my own travels, one thing I've obviously noticed is how our public transit is absolutely lacking. You do mention it is very disparate in terms of being spread out and really not as accessible as we would probably like.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things, going to cities like Shanghai, Beijing in China, or to cities like Japan, like Osaka and Tokyo, one of the biggest things I noticed is that, no matter where you're at, you can step outside and within minutes, you'll have a subway station or some form of public transit very close by, right? And oftentimes, that will also be a subway or a public transit system that can connect you to, other aspects of the city as well very, very quickly, right? I'll say, I think a lot of this stems from the fact that, one, we have really, in the Greater Toronto area at least, just one subway system, right? Which, if we really think about it, it is the Toronto Transit Commission, right? There is a lack of lines on the Toronto Transit Commission. It doesn't do a great job of connecting other aspects of the Greater Toronto area. We don't see that train station running into places like Mississauga, Brampton, and it is really focused on aspects of Toronto.
Yeah.
And even there it lacks, right? Like, it doesn't get into areas such as some of the more underserved areas such as Northwest Toronto, which, now I understand they've recently launched the Line 6, which is going to kind of expand service to there.
Mm-hmm.
But when you go to these places, like, for instance, my ventures while I was in Shanghai, like, they had probably about over 20 different lines. Each of these lines ran for a distance that would average at least 25 to 30 kilometers. So you have these massive lines that are connecting massive parts of the city, and there's a large amount of them, right? So there's always a way to be able to connect from a subway line to another subway line to get to different parts of the city in a pretty decent time frame as well.
Just hearing that is so crazy, because I'm sure people who watch the show and anybody who's ever sat with me in a car for more than 5 minutes has probably realized, yourself very much included, is I find that car-based infrastructure is very detrimental to our ability to form community, detrimental to our mental well-being, in the sense that it's very much a burden on you. If your tire pops, that's your problem. If Your windshield cracks, that's your problem. If there's an accident on the car, accident on the road, that's your problem. You have to be constantly cognizant of like everywhere around you. Is somebody from the left going to merge in? It introduces a lot of stress, and it makes things very, like, car-based infrastructure is something that gets worse the more cars there are on the road. It scales in a negative way. Meanwhile, the more lines you have, the more trains you have running along that line, the better the service.
Absolutely.
Right? Public transit scales better the more you invest into it. Meanwhile, car-based infrastructure scales worse the more cars are on the road. Then you're like, fuck, more traffic, man. That kind of reveals the pain points of car-based infrastructure. And that is 93% of North America's means of transportation. Like maybe I heard like 3 or 4% is public transit and 3 or 4% would be like biking or walking. But we went to an event in Toronto, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this because I find it very interesting. Is we drove through Brampton to get to a destination in Toronto. I just named, for those of you who aren't aware of like how Canada's, Ontario's like, those are two of the worst places to drive. But you gave me a ride and we went to the event together. I have to wonder, what drives you to willingly go through Brampton to get to Toronto, finding parking, dealing with all these random ass fucking forks in the road, dealing with all these aggressive drivers, dealing with all this stress over, for example, going to a local GO station and then taking the GO train and finding a way there via the subway. You willingly chose to do that.
Yeah.
And I have to wonder, my good friend, how could you do this to yourself, and how does this speak to the state of our public transit?
Well, I mean, it totally sucks. Like that's right off the bat, right? We have completely shit public transit system here, unfortunately. A lot of the times I feel that I am compelled to take a car, primarily because if I were to use public transit, in my area at least, one, I have to drive my vehicle to like the nearest what is called the GO station, right? Because in the neighborhood that I live in, one, we don't really have general buses running, right? And there isn't like a train station anywhere nearby. I'm kind of in the bit of the suburbs, right? So if I want to catch a public transit that could connect me back to the core of the city, which is Toronto, I have to go to this GO station. Now, the nearest GO station for us is roughly about a 20-minute drive. So by the time I drive there, I'm looking at, like, from there onwards, another hour and a half, depending on the traffic, to take the actual physical train all the way to downtown Toronto. So for me, it's like, I weigh the pros and cons of this. I am spending almost close to 2 hours on a commute while taking the train, whereas if I drive a car to the same spot, it takes me about an hour. Now, of course, I'm in total agreement that, like, I fucking hate driving. Sorry for my language, but
it brings up these emotions.
Yeah,
people.
It really does bring up that anger because, one, you're right, like, being on the road, there's a lot of drivers that piss you off with the way that they drive. And then, you know, most of our car-based infrastructure isn't even great. So, like, driving into a place like downtown, you're already looking at a traffic jam that's going to extend your commute by 30 to 40 minutes at minimum, right? So it's like we don't really have great options for transportation all around in the city, right? And I think it's a testament that we are kind of forced into choosing between two options that really aren't great, but it's the state of our city, unfortunately.
Right, and that's not getting into the fact that, like, for example, the train, I think I would take one of the lines from a GO station to Toronto, that comes roughly every hour. If my bus that takes me to that station ends up being like 5 or 6 minutes late, it's going to be like an hour. I'm just sitting there just going, you know, just hope this next train.
And all of that is,
any minute, yo.
The biggest thing about that is all of that is time, right? And like, you have to be meticulously planning ahead for your commute. So if you work, for instance, and you've got a set time you have to be downtown, you almost have to add, for safety, like a safety net of like almost 30 to 40 minutes extra of getting out of your house than when you would estimate public transit would take, to just make sure you don't run into those hiccups.
And it happens so frequently. I was taking the bus home yesterday from work,
and
basically we missed, like, one bus came a little early, missed that one. And then later, 3 buses of the exact same type came like with 20 minutes later, back to back to back.
Insane.
And it's like, yo, this is the state. I can understand fully why people say, like, as evil as cars are, they're a necessity.
Yeah. And that's the other side of it too, right? So not only is our infrastructure lacking, the infrastructure that's there is also like not great, right? Like as you mentioned, there isn't any set schedules. Things don't run according to plan. There's often breakdowns, which can totally deviate your entire plan altogether. The difference, one of the biggest differences I noticed in countries like, China, in Japan, the punctuality. Really, really impressive with their entire transportations, right? So like if you're taking a subway, when you're waiting around for your train, they will have a screen up that gives you a list of all the different trains that are expected to come, the timing that they're expected to come for.
Yeah.
And I can't even remember any time that I encountered a train that was late. In fact, most times they were slightly maybe a bit early and sticking around for, straddlers to kind of jump in.
Mm-hmm.
So like, that's essential too, right? If you set schedules for a public transit system and people are utilizing those schedules to kind of plan their day, the service doesn't kind of keep up with that. That just makes it less attractive to people, right? Whereas at least if you're driving a car in the city, you can hop in at whatever time, have an estimated idea of how long you'll need to be on the road and be off and on your way.
Yeah. And that really speaks into kind of the next point I want to get into, which is instead of fixating on how whack public transit is over here in North America, what can it look like? And you painted a beautiful picture of like, it can come like punctual, like every, as per the schedule, the train will be there without any delays that you've noticed ever. I've even heard from another friend who went to Japan that a bus or a train might have been late by 1 minute, and they offered profuse apologies, like, "Oh, we're so sorry, we didn't mean to delay you," or like, "We're really, really sorry about this 1 minute delay."
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are like a lot of reasons why this is, why it's so different over there versus here, and we can get into a few of them. I want to lead with the idea that I think, because everything here is based around cars, most of our public transit has to kind of work around that. So if there's an accident on the road, the buses travel along the same road and they get caught up as well. Streetcars, this will happen to as well. If we have like LLCs, those will also, LRTs, those will also get caught up in traffic jams. Those will also kind of be dependent on traffic. Those will be hung up during rush hour as well. Meanwhile, if you keep things separate, like if you keep the cars in their own lane, trains kind of like underground, uninhibited by the cars, they can go full speed. And in China, I heard they had like 200 to 300 kilometer an hour trains. Were you able to take any of those?
Yeah. So I mean, I did get a chance to take one of their high-speed rail, but I guess before I talk about that, I do want to kind of touch on the point that you do mention about the punctuality and the timeliness, right? Because I think our services here recognize that flaw, because there is a recent motion that's being passed by a city councillor in Toronto to actually get the TTC to pay people back for their fares when the train or the bus or whatever is delayed based on the schedule. So this is to put some accountability back to our public services as well. So I think there is a recognition of the fact that there is an issue there. But like, what is the actual political willpower to make it happen? Which I know we'll chat a bit about that a little later on. But going back to your point about the high-speed rail, the high-speed rail was actually one of the more advanced transportation devices that I've probably been on. So the specific one that I took was the train that ran from China to Beijing. And you have to look at these high-speed rail projects as they're not really designed to connect, like if we're going, for instance, let's say from a part of Toronto to another part of Toronto, right? Like the subways are decent enough to really handle that, right? These are designed to connect like large masses of land, right? So if we're looking at the distance, for instance, from Shanghai to Beijing, you're looking at roughly 1,200 kilometers, right?
1,200,
For comparison, our trip to Montreal is about 550 kilometers, right? So it's almost like that trip one way is like you're back and forth from Toronto to Montreal and then Montreal and back, right?
Yeah.
So that entire trip on that high-speed rail, I was able to run through that in a span of 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So you can already kind of compare, right? This is a train going at 300 kilometers an hour. That's one thing for sure. But to be able to complete that in 3.5 hours, that's quite impressive, right?
That is wild.
Yeah. When you drive to Montreal, just the one way, it takes you 6 hours. So you can already see how this type of technology is going to connect larger cities together. And it does something that, I am actually excited about, which is being able to really connect us through landmass, right? Like, I hate flying. Like,
yeah,
I hate having to go on a plane to go between cities, right? So this really kind of serves as a way to prevent that, right? Because obviously we know planes come with risks. They come with dangers. They come with certain fears, and I rather stay on land.
yeah, honestly. And I just want to do a quick Google. I kind of wanted to see, for comparison's sake, if I wanted to go to British Columbia via transit. So let's what's a good?
That would be via rail, I guess, or Canadian rail. Or...
So if I were to get to like Vancouver City.
Yeah.
So we got the Googles up. We found a similar location, 1,500 kilometers from here to Atlanta City Hall, and that transit would take 1 day and 9 hours via several buses to. Actually, it's just buses the whole way.
Yeah, it probably is. They probably don't even have a rail that runs from Toronto straight to there, right? But it's definitely a monumental feat in public transportation, I think, with these high-speed rails. One thing about it is the cost as well, right? Like, it cost us about $100 to travel from Shanghai to Beijing for one person.
Okay.
Using the high-speed rail, which, when you compare that to the same flight from that space, like from Shanghai to Beijing, you're roughly paying about $400 or $500 for the flight, right? So there's definitely a cost difference as well, and it's commuter friendly. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of being in the air, and for sure.
Because I'm also saying, like, if we were to take like transit all the way from here to Atlanta, that would probably rack us up a few $100s as well, at least.
Of course.
The sheer amount of distance go.
I think you can actually check on that when you're looking at the thing. It'll provide you the estimated costs, probably at the bottom, I believe it is.
Let's take a quick look. See, I'm just going from here to Atlanta's.
Yeah, so go all the way to the bottom. Oh, it's okay. I guess it's not providing that for some reason.
We'll put that in the
edits
in post, but it would be really expensive relative to, I think, $100 going that far in China, especially.
Absolutely.
Also, like you mentioned earlier, is time is also like an important essence as well.
That's it.
1 day versus how long did it take you to get from China to Shanghai?
3.5 hours.
3.5 hours.
It's a bit impressive, right? And this train is going so fast, you wouldn't even realize it's going that fast unless you looked out the window, right? Because that's when you see everything zipping by so fast and you're like, oh, damn. But yeah, it's going so fast. It's got great amenities. I was actually able to order, shockingly enough, KFC right from the train. And literally the way it works is you order on your phone app, because that's the great thing about China. A lot of the payment systems, ordering systems, all of that is done through pretty much a handful of applications like WeChat, Alipay.
Okay.
So I literally placed my order through Alipay, and at the next station, sure enough, somebody comes in and drops me off KFC.
Man went to China to get KFC. You crazy. How much better was it though?
Oh, definitely a lot better than our KFC.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things to unpack here. For example, I got friends in BC. I got friends who live in Edmonton. I got friends who live in Quebec. For me to get over there, I would likely have to get on a plane, have to book some hotels, places to stay at, things like that. It's not easy for me to be able to kind of reach communities in parts of Eastern or Western Canada. Like in Edmonton, in BC, it would be like an event, a monumental event I had to plan. And when you get down to it, when you think about commuting, like for example, from Mississauga to Toronto, if you work there, you're probably spending there and on the way back probably 2.5, 3 hours. That's as long it took you to get from China to Shanghai. Do you know how easy it is for you to, like, somebody could be across the country and you could still reliably be their friend and still reliably come out to their birthday parties, come out to functions, come out to events?
Like literally at 3.5 hours, you're absolutely right. Like if I factor in when I'm commuting to work, it takes me roughly about an hour and a half on most days to go to work, and then another hour and a half coming back from work. And that's using a car, right? So you're already spending that much time, and it's just time going down the drain to and from work, right? So I absolutely agree. It definitely opens up the opportunity to still stay connected with community, even when there are far distances. And I mean, I think it's a testament a bit to the project of China, right? And the political ideology that's kind of enforcing their movement and so forth, right? So I think it's important because people are first, and we do need the ability to have community. And I think that's a big challenge that we have here. And part of it is the transportation means here that lead to it, right?
Yeah. It's kind of like the ultimate piece. Like literally our means of transportation are the ways you connect people to each other. You connect cities to each other. You connect populations to each other. And we can't even imagine that in Canada at a large scale without involving a plane. But let's maybe zoom it in a bit. When Rumi, Sunny and I were going around Toronto, we took some streetcars, we took the GO train to get there. We kind of commented on what Toronto felt like. Toronto felt like a bunch of people kind of like walking towards their next business. Yeah. Like they're like, I'm like 3 or 4 people will be walking, they'll be heading to Starbucks, maybe another 2 or 3 people head somewhere else. Rumi, Sunny and I went into a camera shop for a little bit. We kind of saw what was up. We were all like, we didn't have a reason kind of to talk to each other. We didn't have a reason to kind of like mingle with each other. And it felt like the closest thing we had to anything that involved street food was maybe like a hot dog stand, in which case we gave the guy our money and then we all just kind of sit around and like wait for the guy to finish our order. I'm a true believer that a lot of this kind of comes from how separated we are as a community. And I think a lot of this comes from like top down, like our transit systems and how hard it is for us to be able to build that community. When I hear about how different it is in China, how even the local transits, like you mentioned, there were like 30, 40 different lines in like more local areas. What does that look like on the street level when you were walking around? Did you notice any more like a more vibrant street life? Did you notice?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. I mean, speaking first, I guess, on Japan. Okay. In Japan, I mean, I felt it was a little bit kind of like how it is here, just the difference being massive city. They did have a lot of like street vendors and things like that, but you still got a bit of that same people kind of keep to themselves. I didn't have those instances where I was like, okay, it's like, this is like such a cool thing to see. Like people are getting together and doing this thing, right? Like I didn't have any of those types of moments there. Like when I was in China, I thought that was a massive difference, right? Okay. Like for instance, you'd have ma and pa shops, right? Yeah. Where the family will literally come out onto the sidewalk with an entire meal and everybody will be eating outside together as a big family, right? This is happening right on the street. I saw places where they'll have like squares and public spots, right? Like kind of like how we've got squares downtown where like Dundas Square, for instance, they'll have those types of squares in some of these local spots. Yeah. Where like old women will be just getting together and dancing. Like they will be putting on a performance for people to see, right? So there was this really sense of like trying to build community. You would see people playing cards outside, and people engaging, but then of course you have people that are also just minding their business like anywhere else. That's right fine. Yeah. Totally. Yeah,
but it did, like, the streets did feel a little different, right?
They definitely felt a lot more alive, a lot of colors. Especially when we were in Shanghai, we got to actually walk down Nanjing Road, which is a big like kind of like a shopping strip, just so much colors, and it leads right out to the Bund, which is like kind of like their waterfront skyline area, and it's just spectacular how many people are out there just gathering. They're taking pictures, they're out there with family.
Oh hell yeah.
Yeah, so really vibrant culture, I would say.
That's beautiful, bro. we were talking about before was like how did the infrastructure lead to a better street presence? How did that lead to like street culture? What did the people on the on the streets look like? What did the vendors look like? And you painted a picture with the ma and pa shop actually feeding people on the streets.
Yeah.
Kind of leads into the next question. This is something I rambled on a little bit about on the first episode, which is there's so much area just dedicated to pavement, which is just a lot of parking lots.
Yes.
So much mass. Like the buildings here relatively aren't that much bigger than the amount of tarmac and pavement needed to just house all the cars.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if the public transit is so good in China, how much, and in Japan, how much different would just the city itself look like? You mentioned there was a lot more color, there was a lot more beautiful things, but was there more just density of buildings? Were there more
Absolutely.
like parks?
Absolutely.
Talk to me about that. Paint me that picture.
Yeah, no, I mean, you've hit the nail there when you mentioned the density, right? Because density, I think, is one of the key things I noticed in all of these cities, especially in Japan, right? Japan is known to be one of the most, like, I guess, dense city in the world, right? So, I mean, Tokyo specifically when we're talking about it. But I think that has to do with the fact that, like, there are people who drive cars in these places, but like the cars don't seem to be like the main mode of transportation, right? And some of these places, like when you look at a place like Tokyo, these are mega cities, but they're on a very small island, right? Like, so they have a need to also build infrastructure in a way that is very dense, right? Because you've got a large population, and in order to be able to house them on such small amount of land, right? You've got to build upwards, right? You're not going to get kind of what you get in a place like Canada, right, where our geography is already so massive that, you know, the development has kind of weirdly revolved around that way, right? And part of it's our housing here too. I mean, so much of our housing, especially if you look at Toronto, a lot of zoning was done around around single family homes, right? And if you're focusing so much on that, you've already taken up so much of the land to build that home. The only other option is to further push yourself out, to continue building like homes within that parameter, right? Unless you look to finally start to get rid of shit and start building upwards, right? So with that said, as people start to move out further and further, instead of funneling that money back into like actually building proper infrastructure that connects those further areas back to the core, we just build highways. And we get a lot of roads, which means you then take parts of like downtown or parts of Brampton or Mississauga and you have to build out parking lots. And now if you're building a hospital, that hospital has to have a parking lot. So it is a very car dependent society, and all of that trickles in to lead to kind of the development we see around here as well.
And what we can build, right? Like you mentioned, there has to be space for the hospital, there has to be space for the ambulance to be able to get in, a special lane designated for that, and then special lane, all the parking lots for all the patients and all their families are visiting them. They require so much space. And I wanted to follow up just one quick thing I'll add, like a question I'll add to that'll go in with what you're talking about, is in China and Japan, were the residential areas and the place where people lived and the stores, the hospitals, were they relatively closer together? It feels like there's a kind of a distance with them here.
You know, I can't really speak to that. I know, at least when it comes to hospitals, I can't speak to. I know where we were, I did see the H sign in a couple of places, so there must have been a hospital nearby, but it wasn't something I went out the way to kind of to kind of go and look for. But when it does come to like stores and just like general, like, you know, places where you would have to go to get things you need to just day to day do your stuff, I would say most of them were within a walking distance, like a pretty decent walking distance. And you know, with both Japan and China, like the prices for things did vary, right? Like even the public transit, there was variance in prices. But one thing I'll say is that they did a great job, both of the towns, of making sure that wherever transit is or wherever it's leading to, you're coming out and, you know, there'll be a restaurant nearby, or there'll be a shop nearby, or, you know, you'll be able to get, I don't know, like friggin' gas if you need to for some reason, even though you're on public transit. But but everything generally kind of was within a good vicinity of each other.
All right. I guess what I want to ask is, while you were in Japan and China, How did you spend most of your time getting around, getting to the places you wanted to get to? What did that look like? Was there a lot of walking? Were you able to walk around? Did you end up busing or transiting a lot? What did it look like?
So most of the time, public transit. So
Okay.
China, Japan, both spots, we took the subways. The great thing there is like, I mean, most of the places we were visiting were, well, your typical kind of touristy types of spots.
Yeah.
And the great thing really is there is that when you take a subway station, at least to the spots that we wanted to visit, no matter where you're exiting, you're not looking at a walk beyond 10 minutes from that spot. So everything is within a subway's reach.
Okay.
And sometimes, you might be like, oh, like it's taking time for that station. Like your next stop might be the station you need to go at, right? And like the distance to that might be like a couple of kilometers, but walking that might take you like 30 minutes or 40 minutes. But that goes to show you, right? Like if you really wanted that option to say, hey, I only need to take one station down, it's only really about 30 minutes, I'll just walk it and get a little exercise. You could do that as well. So we often did that as well. It's a great way we got to explore the city as well. But absolutely, like hopping on the subway there, wherever you're trying to get to, you're not too far away once you're hopping off of it, which I think goes to speak to the amount of lines they have and how connected they are, right? Because no matter which line you're taking, it'll some way get you close to a line exit that gets you near wherever the hell you need to go. If that makes sense.
No, I get you, because it's easy to like get around wherever you need to. Like you're painting the picture beautifully with all these lines everywhere. It's so easy to get off of a line onto another one somewhere. They'll connect to each other.
They'll connect you in,
a beautiful
exactly.
spider web of transit.
Exactly. You should actually, if you ever get a chance, pull up a map of like the Shanghai subway station or the subway map or Beijing or Tokyo and compare it to a TTC map, and you will see how laughable it is.
All right, Rumi, put that on the screen right now. That's your assignment, bro. Pause the video if you gotta.
Yeah, because it's funny. It's funny when you look at the two. You can see very clearly like how underdeveloped we are with our public transportation.
Gotcha. All right. And one thing I kind of bringing it back to North America for a bit. Maybe I'm digging too deep into it. Maybe I'm just being weird with it. I think there's a bit of a stigma against public transit here because of how bad it is, because of how infrequently it shows up, how expensive it can be for how poor the service is, that there's there's an unwillingness to take it. Like you mentioned earlier, also with how like it's so bad that you kind of are forced to take a car where you need to go. Did you feel that same way when you were in China and in Japan? Did people feel kind of willing? Did you notice that a lot of people were with you? Were the trains kind of like densely packed buses?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think most people take public transit. The thing that I found interesting about China specifically was that if they weren't taking public transit, there were other transportation means that were just better overall in terms of for the environment, if you're talking about it, right? Like you don't have to take a car. There's an amazing bicycle system in China where...
Talk to me about that. What the heck?
So where literally like you get, like I said, because they use either Alipay, WeChat to do most of the stuff, you download the app for these random bicycles that are laying around everywhere. Scan it, pay for it, and off you go, ride it for however long, and you get charged based on wherever you drop it off type of deal. So I saw a lot of people using those. That's how a lot of people were getting around. The other thing that was very big there were like electric mopeds, right? Because these small little electric kind of scooter vehicles that people would drive around with, those were actually very, very popular there as well. But there were cars, right? Like it wasn't to say there weren't. Amazing thing in China was that so much of the vehicles were electric as well, right? So that was one of the things that really stuck out because electric vehicles there are just generally a lot cheaper than they are in other parts of the world, right? So that was definitely one of the key things. But yeah, same thing with Japan. They had a great bicycling culture there as well. And most people are either going to opt in for a train from the looks of it or use one of these other transportation methods.
Gotcha. That honestly... I can see us taking bits and pieces from that because we do have like those orange bicycles you can take or like a couple of electric scooters you can kind of get on. It seems like we're slowly trying to like add bits and pieces of those. but it's more difficult to make work given the infrastructure. In certain places, there are points where like the sidewalk just ends and you kind of have to go past the entrance to a highway to get onto the next bit of land.
Yeah.
It feels like we're trying to make things that work in other countries work in our infrastructure, and that kind of it kind of clashes a bit, right?
Yeah.
I do appreciate kind of that the efforts are being made, but it is really kind of like the fundamental, like what it is the foundation is like really whack. So everything is being built on top of that, and you're getting like a leaning tower kind of going on.
I mean, the other challenge just is overall like getting these projects to the finish line, right? If we talk about Eglinton LRT, the recent Line 6 that just opened up, these took many years to get to where they were, right? Like I think, if I recall, Line 6 started sometime around 2016, and we're just getting it finished now, right? So we almost had a 10-year project there. Whereas the Eglinton LRT has been going on since what, like 2010, probably a few years before then, and we're still nowhere near it. And now I know they're talking about starting testing, and that the train, like they're aiming for like a launch date at some time at the end of January in the new year. But the fact that it took that much time to even build a little bit of this infrastructure goes to show that there is a problem with the way that pretty much how we structure like these contracts or something. Because what happened, right? Like why did it take so long? What is going on that it took this long? Especially when you see a country like China put out videos of them building train stations in like 10 hours, right? Like it's insane. And I obviously have my ideas of why that's the case. You know, living in a capitalist system, there's a certain way that production has to be directed, which is mostly focused around profit.
For profit, yeah, exactly.
Versus, you know, there's a need to build and plan cities, at least from what I understand in China, around a socialist model where, you know, they're focused on making sure that the needs of the people are being met. Right?
So you're saying it's like a social good.
It's a social good, exactly. And, you know, if you look at a lot of their development of cities as well, right? They're planned well in advance, right? They don't just move people in, they build the city first, and then they move people in, right? And I don't think we have that same type of capacity here, unfortunately. And the interest of private capital coming in obviously makes things a lot more difficult as well.
So much uglier, bro.
Absolutely.
And I kind of wanted to leapfrog off that a little bit. I feel like there might also be a little bit of red scare kind of going in against things that are deemed public, for public goods, especially down south in the States. Like North America, I kind of see as like one big landmass. Like it's North America. I don't want to separate Canada and America too much, but like, for example, they're against public healthcare. We're kind of pushing towards privatizing a lot of things that were eventually public. Do you think part of the reason that we aren't getting these kinds of infrastructural changes that we desperately need, that would build community, that would help the common people out a lot, is red scare propaganda? And do you think that not just from the developers, but from the citizens as well? Do you think that that's something that's in our minds, or do you think it's more purely political and more purely...
I mean, I'd argue it's probably more tied to neoliberal policies than anything else, right? If you think about the way our society is structured around building profit, right? There has to be something, because who is going to fund a lot of these infrastructure projects? Like, let's be honest, the political parties we have don't have the political will to really extract the tax income from the actual capitalist class, right? Because we know how much they skirt tax laws and whatnot. So it is working class people that often pay for this, and there's always mismanaging of budgets and private capital getting involved to fuck around with contracts, raise prices, do things like this, right? Stall projects, whatever it might be, right? So because there's such a profit-based motive around these projects, right? The people pushing for it, they have to see something out of it. And I feel we don't have technically, I guess, really industrial base here anymore that really pushes the need to build that infrastructure. Like I almost think, like, because they know most of their profits are extracted from other parts of the world, like, why invest back into their home countries like they would in the past, right? And part of it's also just a weakening labor force in these countries. We don't have a strong enough, at least from what I see, a labor movement that can actually get out on the streets and demand these things as well, right?
Yeah.
And the political parties that should be kind of taking the reign and pushing for these things, they don't have the type of power in our society as some of the more right-wing, more liberal parties do, right?
And plus, like, those parties are not serving the people, they're serving capital, hence the name of the system, hence, like, what it is we're kind of stuck inside of. And that kind of really throws a wrench into things, because one of the main things I wanted to get into was, like, what would it look like to see Canada and America, to see North America kind of be able to develop something like a China and Japan with their railway system, the East Asia, how much better their infrastructure is, how much better their transportation is, how much better everything is laid out, how much more efficiently, and how much for the people's benefit everything is laid out. I always wondered what are like some of the first steps we could take towards pushing for that, towards agitating for that, towards getting something like that to happen, and what would be required, do you think, from Canada, from the political parties actually pulling this off? What would be required for us to see a move towards like better transit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's no one simple answer to it, right? Obviously, there's multiple angles by which we can kind of tackle this issue. One, of course, is that support reforms that do go on, right? Like reforms that are put in Parliament, put in City Hall, wherever it might be, that kind of encourage more investment into public transportation, public infrastructure, like encourage those, right? And support those. But I think in the long run, this is often a question around how we structure our economies, right? How we structure our economic mode of production in a nutshell, right?
Gotcha.
I think in a society that's very profit driven, there becomes less and less of a need to build these types of infrastructure. There's also a push to privatize these infrastructure for capital gain, right? And I think that often results in mediocre services, right? Prices going too high, cutting corners, because what often happens with privatization is that, there's initially a lowering of prices to draw a consumer base in, and then once that consumer base is in, they've kind of monopolized the market. They raise prices, they cut staff, they do all of the stuff they can to continue ensuring that their quarterly profits are going up, right? So I do think the way we structure our societies, our economy has a big component to this. Having a system where we build infrastructure around actual people's needs, or we build societies around people's needs, would be the most ideal way. But again, that's like the longer term project, right? Exactly. I think in the meantime, we obviously want to advocate for whatever we can through like the political avenues that we have today, right? So like encouraging counselors, like this counselor that I mentioned earlier that had put on a motion to ask TTC to compensate people for late fare, right? We should encourage supporting that and get people to actually make sure that gets passed, right? Like these are just minor ways we can kind of tackle the issue in the interim, but I think to really have some success in this, you need a longer term project that kind of shifts the general consciousness of, how we envision our societies to be, right? I actually unfortunately feel that what we're going to see more of is a further decline of our public infrastructure, right? It's amazing to hear about these services like Line 6 starting up, but did you know this, like just today in the news I saw some runner outrun the Line 6. He purposely was trying to show how slow it is.
It's stuck in traffic.
A 10-kilometer track, they pointed out, takes 55 minutes. So where did all that money go?
What did we go
towards? What did we really create? Like a 10-kilometer, like if I drive in a car, 10-kilometer takes me 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I do feel like there has to be a bit of a shift in terms of the way we organize our economies, but that's a large question, right? And it's a bigger battle.
I'm sorry, I put a lot of that on you. I will kind of segue, like there is one, like the Scandinavian countries, I forget which one, Denmark I think it might have been, one of the biking capitals of the world. They kind of got that as a result of a lot of protest. There was a protest called Stop the Kindermord. Kindermord, which is basically stop the killing of children. Because so many kids were dying in car crashes, so many kids were getting run over, and they realized that cars were a big danger, just in a general sense, just how many people die in crashes, how many families get torn apart, and these kinds of things. What they did was they took to the streets and they rioted, they flipped cars over, they burned things, and eventually places that were like filled with roads and parking lots were slowly taken apart, and we saw more green areas, we saw a lot more areas people could walk, we saw more bikeable areas, and we saw infrastructure change in such a way there that allowed these areas to become more bikeable. So maybe that could be something. No, we don't advocate for any agitation or anything here, but maybe looking into just questioning the how car-based infrastructure works and seeing how far we're willing to stay on this ride. Maybe focusing more on education and kind of talking about the limitations of cars could be important to just plant the seeds in everybody's minds that, you know, there are other means. That's kind of why I really wanted to talk to you about your trip to China and Japan, is because I've only ever taken public transit here and it's pretty whack.
Yeah.
But there is something so beautiful in that, like, there we can envision, we don't even have to like imagine a better public transit system. It already exists.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I wanted like you to help us paint that picture. And that's why I'm so appreciative that you took that time to be able to talk to us about this today.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, one thing I'll interject and say is that I will encourage you to agitate. That's the one thing. But you're absolutely right that, you know, there are great models that already exist in the world. I always say when it comes to a lot of the European cities, they've been able to develop really cities that can have bicycle infrastructure or you know, subway infrastructure, and I think that comes from the fact that these aren't massive geographical land spaces, right? I think that's something we have to always keep in mind when we're thinking about Canada, right? Because we are such a big piece of land that's spread wide across out, and it becomes almost more difficult to try to connect all of that, right? So I think that's something that does have a big impact to why we don't have the infrastructure, at least for our public transit, that we would like to see. But yeah, I mean, models exist, right? Like places like China are also very big. They're not small, right? They're very massive places, and they've found ways to connect like these really far spots. Like I mentioned, Beijing to Shanghai, 1,200 kilometers, but they found a way through rapid transit to be able to connect it in 3.5 hours, right? So it's not that we don't have the technological capacity to do it. We absolutely do. We just lack an economic system that would allow that to take place in an effective way, right?
And the hunger within us for that kind of...
And the hunger within us, right? And our will to fight. Like even going back to the European countries, so much of that, like you mentioned, took the people standing up and fighting for it, right? Like it didn't just come out of nowhere.
Yeah, it didn't come out of benevolence.
And that's another thing that's lacking, and it kind of feeds into each other because, like you mentioned, lack of public transit, not being able to build communities like we want to, which then feeds into this inability to actually organize and fight and come together to do something about this.
It's all connected, everyone.
There is a connection. There is a connection.
One of the final things I kind of want to talk about is I've rallied against cars a lot today.
Yeah.
They cost a lot too, eh?
Oh, yeah. Fuck yeah.
The insurance, the amount the fucking box costs, you get in an accident, you got to get a new one. Bro, this shit is crazy. But
and then the postal code discrimination, right?
What the heck is this?
The insurance companies in the GTA.
Oh, yeah. Bro, if you have a red car, insurance goes up.
Oh, yeah. If you live in Brampton, insurance goes up.
Oh, 100%. What I kind of wanted to ask was, we have this bias here as well because, again, our commutes are also relatively expensive here. Go Transits are privately owned. And not to say that they're gouging us, but they are decently expensive. Like if we were to take long commutes, that would really add up really fast.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to ask, how affordable kind of was it for you to get around? What did it end up costing a dent? Big dents in your wallet and in your kind of like the money you had to spend on that trip? Did taking the transit a lot end up knocking a lot out of your wallet, or did you feel it was relatively light and it was relatively worth it? How did you see the value aspects of taking public transit?
Absolutely worth it.
Oh,
I will 100% say that. I mean, starting off, there's obviously differences in terms of pricing from Japan to China that I'm going to speak about, but both countries, exceptionally cheaper than what we pay here, right?
Okay.
So to give you an idea, like when I was commuting in China, whether that was on the Beijing transit or the Shanghai transit, most of the spots that I went to, I was not paying more than I think it was about 3 yuan, I believe it was, or
3 yuan.
yeah, the amount ends up being about 60 cents Canadian, right? Like when you actually convert it, it's about 60 cents Canadian, and that's enough to like get me to most of the spots that I wanted to. Now, of course, we had those one-off trips where, like, for instance, when we were coming into like the city from the airport, we had to take the train, the subway from the airport all the way down into the city core. The commute around that was roughly about 45 kilometers. So, you know what, we would drive, like if we're driving from like Brampton to downtown Toronto.
Yeah.
So roughly about there, 45 kilometers. And still the cost was only $5, like for that entire trip. And it was one nice, straight, smooth ride. Like I didn't have hiccups in terms of it stopping and all that. It was an express train as well. Now where that differed a bit was like, that was China. Now where that differed a bit was in Japan. Japan, still relatively cheaper than here, but most rides, you know, you end up paying anywhere from about $1 to $3
okay.
for most of the places you're going
60
to.
cents, yeah.
And their ride actually from the airport coming into the city core was a lot more. So they did charge $15. Now I want to be very clear. Like again, one system has public transit that is truly public, right? Japan has kind of a semi-private public kind of system, but I think there is a big component of it that is very privatized, right? So there's obviously that incentive to want to make profit, but it's not to downplay it. It is still relatively decent price-wise. One of the annoying aspects though about the Japanese one was that you do have to buy, so if you don't have an iPhone, because you can pay for like your transit fare with your iPhone by getting this virtual digital card, but if you don't have an iPhone, you do have to buy like the physical what is called a Suyuka card. And I didn't know at the time, because we bought this on our first trip, so I didn't know at the time that you can get some tourist one. And you have to pay $20 for that, right? So it's not cheap, but you pay $20, and that's the card you fill up with your money, and then are able to tap everywhere to go around the trains.
Sounds like you got that sounds like a tourist trap, like a way to get money from the people coming to Japan.
Yeah, and I didn't know at the time, but like there is like some sort of tourist version you can get for it. Because the one that I bought is one of those ones that once you buy it one time, you can use it for life, right? So anytime I go back, that's what I use. I don't have to rebuy it, right? But I think the tourist ones, they come with like a limited time that they're usable for.
Right, maybe like a few weeks or something.
Yeah. So that's the difference. But it is exceptionally cheaper, right? Like I think that one costs like $5-6 versus 20.
Well, all I'm saying is, you make 4 more trips to Japan, and that little mistake will have paid itself off.
Exactly. But the other side of it too is like, I found that the like, you know, we've got taxis and Uber and all that here. Like when I use that, like I have to use that in China on the last day, right? Because one of the things that's very similar to public transit there as it is here is the hours of operation, right? So they pretty much open at 5 a.m., close at I believe it's about 12 p.m. around
12
there.
p.m.?
Midnight. 12 a.m. Sorry.
12 a.m.
12 a.m. Midnight is what I meant to say. So it goes around 12 a.m. Which is kind of similar to here, right? Which isn't really a huge difference.
What about our stoners, man? How will they get around?
I know. I guess for me, where it was really frustrating was the last day we were in Shanghai. We needed to get to the airport by 5 a.m. because we had a flight going out from there to Japan at 8 a.m. So, you know, you got to be there about 3 hours early. So we had to take a taxi on that day. But even with the taxi, I was quite shocked that much of a distance. So again, imagine taking a Uber from Brampton to downtown Toronto. What are you looking to pay? Like
$120?
Probably, right? I don't know. I haven't done it in a while, but if that's what it is, that's what it is, right? But that only cost me $20.
No, I was always that. It's probably like 70, but how much did it cost you?
$20.
$20,
which isn't too bad. Like I didn't think it was that horrible for the distance that we traveled. Right?
And how did the roads look like? Well, I mean, I guess you were driving late at night.
I mean, it was early in the morning.
Early in the morning, sorry, yeah.
But you could still see it. Like they have pretty cool highways there. Like I'll say that they do have highways. They do still have a road system. It's not like they don't.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really unique though, like with their infrastructure, because they've got this cool way of integrating so much of the ancient infrastructure into the modern infrastructure.
Oh, hell yeah.
So, I mean, we saw this in Beijing a lot where, you'll have your regular roads you can ride on, and then you'll have these things like, they're called hutongs. They're like these little alleyways that kind of like go in and out. Kind of like, in India we have the gullies.
Yeah.
They're kind of like the gullies, but like they actually have like residential, like people like actually living there, right? Like they've got their houses and stuff there. And yeah, people like, sometimes I wouldn't know how they did it, but they managed to do it. They drive their big car through this alley and it's like covering the whole thing, and like everybody is politely working around it, like nobody is making us think about it, which really which I found was really cool, because it was like taking parts of, because those hutongs go back thousands of years. I think they say they go back to one of the dynasties of the Chinese Empire, right? Like I think it's the Yuan dynasty, if I'm correct. But they go back so many years, and they've managed to maintain some of this and still integrate it into the modern, infrastructure that they've developed, which I thought was really cool to see. Yeah, so you get kind of best of both worlds.
And I guess, as a tourist in both of these locations, how did you feel? Did you feel like, for example, when you hear about like in Jamaica, locals can't even go to their own beaches because those are gated off for tourists to come around. How did you feel the tourist experience was? And did you feel like it was any kind of intrusive upon their existing kind of like, did you feel like you were infringing in the same way, like, somebody who goes to Jamaica to go to the beaches that somebody there can't go on? Did you feel that kind of same way while you were around China and Japan?
I mean, I wouldn't say so. I mean, to some degree, you probably get some animosity. I probably sensed that a little bit more in Japan than China per se, but like you get that level of animosity where people probably know you're a tourist and they're like, it's another one of you guys, right? Like that type of a deal. But I think most people were really happy. I found in China, they were really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
There were many times like we didn't know where we were going, and most people on the street were more than happy to help us out, even though our like Mandarin was like non-existent, right? Like we couldn't even speak the language.
Yeah.
Like other than like saying hi, like ni hao, right?
Ni
Like
hao.
there wasn't much more I could say, right? So people were very friendly. They directed us as best as they could. They were patient when we used things like translation apps with them.
Oh, okay.
So I found that was actually very cool to see. I don't think you get that same type of hostile vibe. And the other side of it too, in China at least, I found was that they have a lot of like domestic tourists, like just people internally within the country that are just like
Going around, yeah.
outside, and like they're like doing touristy things. Like we visited many different historical sites. So for instance, when we were in the Forbidden City,
Yeah.
I saw lots of different tourists there, but a lot of them look like local Chinese residents that were coming out to visit this
From
place.
like other quadrants of
Maybe
the country.
from other provinces, other parts of China that are coming out to see it. And it was interesting to see that, right? Especially because like some of it was just weekdays, and you would think, oh, all these people aren't at work. Like, what are they doing here? They've got all this time. But it goes to show a bit as to the level of economic progress that China and their people have been able to see over the last little while. That gives them the ability to have that leisure time as well.
You know what also shows? How sick the public transit is, and how they're easily able to go around.
How easily they're getting around.
If I were to walk around Edmonton, I'm like, ooh, what's that? What is that? What are
and that's
these?
another thing we never really touched on this, right? We talked a lot about GTA, like how bad our public transit is, but North America is not just the GTA. Like we've got an entire country. If we're the biggest city and this is our infrastructure here, how is it in Edmonton? How is it in Calgary? Because I'm pretty sure it's absolutely more horrendous than this.
If New York City and Toronto are like the best transit we've got in our continent,
it's
kind of
not a good look. Now I'll give New York City a little bit more of a pat on the back. I mean, they've got an aging infrastructure for sure, but at least it gets you connected throughout New York.
Fair enough, yeah.
You could still take a subway to get around a little bit better than you do here.
Yeah, you'll just meet like a couple rats along the way. It is what it is.
Definitely a lot of interesting things along the way, that's for sure.
Little give, little take, a little
Exactly,
experience for everyone.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, this has been such a fun discussion, Herman. It really helps me understand what public transit can be. 'Cause I'm like the biggest car hater, but it's hard for me to convince anybody else, like, yo, we should take buses. We should do this. Something can be better than this.
Yeah.
But it's really great to like look at examples. We mentioned Denmark, we mentioned Japan, we mentioned China a lot. And what these really kind of show us is, as a community, if we can demand better, if we can push for better, if we can envision what it is we actually want to see, we can actually start like advocating for these things more directly, as opposed to, we want we want the highways to be less shitty, we want one more lane. We can actually start pushing for like, hey,
Agreed.
we would like underground railway systems that actually take us to our destinations and don't have to go with car-based infrastructure.
Absolutely.
And it's so frustrating to see in 2026 that they're introducing LRTs that were started 10 years ago that go like in rush hour will be like slower than a runner.
Yeah.
It's
frustrating indeed.
It is frustrating, but I want to leave the viewers with hope that we have visions of better. We talked about it a lot. We encourage you guys watching at home to do your own research, look into these things, look into these locations that we're talking about. Rumi will post maybe a couple pictures if he's so inclined. And thank you all for watching. Thank you for following us on this journey. We'll see you guys on the next episode.
Thank you guys.